Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jack, and this is Daniel, and we're going to be speaking to you today on behalf of Save the Children. Before we start our presentation, we have a quick 30-second video that I'd like to show you.
There are no words to describe what you have just seen. This young child, his name is Omran. I'm sure you guys have heard of him on the news. It is something that is truly distressing and something that not only Omran goes through, a lot of children are going through this in Syria, but this person just caught the attention of the news outlets just because of the fact that he's covered with blood on his face. And as I mentioned, it is very distressing. I would like to talk to you guys about an experience that I personally went through during high school. During high school in my senior year, we were basically given a paper to submit, and the theme of that paper is what comes next. So I thought to myself that what better to describe what comes next than these children and these families on the Syrian-Jordanian border. So that is exactly what I did. I traveled to the border and I spoke with the children and I spoke with their parents. The children told me that they know nothing but war. Imagine 5 years of knowing nothing but war, nothing but rockets flying and bullets landing on you and your family. The parents told me that they fled with anything just to get by. And as well as this, don't forget that these people are targets. I mean, they're being targeted by various terrorist organizations within Syria, and the fact of them being, the fact of them walking at night in dark environments with no lights is something that is truly distressing. Throughout this presentation, we will be talking about two problems and two solutions. In a very vague manner, I would like to describe to you all what the first problem is. The first problem relies upon the fact that children in Syria face difficulties in leaving. They don't know where their next meal comes from, and they carry anything just to get by. For time constraints, we will be focusing on three major aspects within this problem. Number one being infrastructure, number two being aid convoys, and number three being ISIS. The solution in a very vague manner, I don't know how there can be a very possible solution that we can do, but basically we are willing to seize every chance we get to save these kids. Even though that is hard, now is the time to do it, and I'll explain why in the presentation. We will be doing this by purchasing a fleet of buses.
The second major problem is that once children cross the border out of Syria, they don't have the appropriate food, water, or shelter that they need. One solution for this that we're going to talk about is purchasing waterproof tents for the wintertime and when it rains, because their shelter isn't adequate for protecting them in those circumstances, as well as establishing a food and water trust fund. Again, these details will be discussed later in our presentation. Our organization is best suited to receive this $25,000 grant, but before we start, we'd like to show you a few photos of the tremendous work we've been doing around the world. Switch it real quick. So I'll give you guys a second to catch up and you can take a look at what we've been doing. For example, there have been 130,000 people with clean water, resolved Save the Children. That's where all the countries that we've been active in. And as you can see, we put a little more attention in the Middle East, so that's what we're going to discuss today.
And as you can tell there as well, we only allocate 10% to the Middle East, which is something we significantly have to improve. Okay, so I'll be examining the first problem, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the fact that children in Syria face difficulties in leaving. And we will be talking about infrastructure, aid convoys, and ISIS. So here is a picture of some infrastructure, something that you're not probably used to seeing since it's all broken. Angela Huddleston, a senior executive program manager for World Vision that has been working with World Vision for 15 years, so this is a person that knows what she's doing, states that civilian infrastructure has been targeted, leading to mass civilian casualties, including women and children. And as you can see, you can stay on that slide, it's fine.
Sure.
As you can see, this is pretty obvious. According to Mercy Corps, another nonprofit organization we work with, roads in the city are close to conflict. Highways are closed, and they have been damaged due to the rubble and the debris that was left on them. Now on the next slide, we'll show you a picture of an aid convoy. And there it is. This is an aid convoy. An aid convoy is used to send aid and pick up children in order to help them. According to the United Nations, a total of 8.4 million Syrian children are in need of routes to leave the country. Putting that 8.4 million into perspective, that is the size of Manhattan in New York City. Take for a moment the fact that all of Manhattan has to flee New York and they're in need of safe routes. I mean, this is something that is beyond imaginable. As I mentioned earlier, UN aid convoys have been sent up to pick children, and they have been damaged by Russian airstrikes. The head of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, states that these attacks are sickening and deliberate, and something that is very distressing for us to see. Now on the next slide, you will see something that we all hate to see, and that is ISIS, the Islamic State in Syria and the Middle East. According to Schwartzstein, a former senior editor at Reuters, now working with Newsweek, states that there are a total of 23 million landmines in Syria, and ISIS is doing their job to locate the rest of these landmines to place them in pivotal areas to stop children from fleeing. Human Rights Watch, another non-profit organization we work with, recently reported that 9 people trying to flee Syria have died and enter Turkey have died as a result of these landmines. And now moving on to the solution. As I said, it is very difficult to promise a solution, but we will seize every chance we have to save these children. We hope to be purchasing 2 buses, each bus costing a total of $6,250, and they are very cheap due to the fact that the Jordanian government have subsidized these buses. Routes will travel to Aleppo from Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, but we are focusing on Jordan. And different routes will be used to avoid the rubble. And the reason I was talking about good news earlier, the reason that this is good news is because ISIS is being driven out of Aleppo as we speak. I mean, I'm not sure if you heard about the war going on in Mosul, but there is where they're being targeted and they're being driven out. So if we can't do this now, then unfortunately it's never. Now my partner will talk about the second problem.
So like I stated earlier, children don't have the proper resources such as food, water, and shelter after they cross the Jordanian border. We work closely with an organization called the UNHCR, and they've said that these children are placed under the concern category, and there are 656,000 kids that are in this category. That's twice. I'm from St. Louis. That's twice the population of St. Louis City, which is pretty shocking. One of the problems is shelter, like I said, and according to the New York Times, these refugee camps have over 30,000 different campsites or homes. Allison Ludwith, a master's student of architecture from the University of Harvard, is now working on her dissertation. And in her dissertation, she says there are a total of 24,000 households. Now keep in mind, that's not people, that's just households. So 24,000, we have 24,000, upwards of 24,000 students, that go to the University of Kansas. And so that's only just the number of households in these refugee camps, which is pretty astonishing. The Jordanian government is unable to continue funding because they're out of money and they can't provide shelter for all of these people. And according to the World Health Organization, it's estimated that the cost of providing shelter is over $1 billion. Tents are in very bad condition, and the weather that beats down these tents is just absolutely destroying them, and it leaves these children exposed to the elements, which is just unacceptable. Food and water. The World Food Program has reported a 50% budget decrease for food and water for children that are suffering. There's a voucher system that's been put in place, but it only has a maximum of $21 per day, and we spend on average $151 on food a week as a society in the United States. Elizabeth Mendez is the associate editor at Global Research and Gallup, which is a global research and consulting firm, and they're the company that came up with the $151 a week statistic. According to the World Health Organization, Jordan has one of the lowest levels of water resources available per capita in the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to purchase waterproof tents, and according to eBay and other online sources, one tent only costs $25, and we're going to purchase 350 of these. Children are sometimes denied food, and as a result of new e-cards and the machines, we're going to purchase new machines that work every single time as to ensure that they will get food. And we're going to remove the $21 cap a month. Finally, we're going to establish a food and water fund to waive the cap, and 50% of the donations for this fund are going to go to the food for the children.
In conclusion, we spoke about 2 problems and 2 solutions throughout our presentation. The first problem being that children cannot leave Syria safely. The second problem being that children that arrive at the border do not have adequate food, water, and shelter supplies that they need.
So we need to seize every opportunity we can to help these children by either busing them out or giving them food, water, and shelter. By purchasing waterproof tents, upgrading the e-card technology, waiving the cap, and establishing a food and water fund, we will do so. So we've done our part to help the children. Help us do so, and help the children yourselves. Thank you.
Thanks.